Hello, this is Megan.
And this is Mark.
Welcome to our 37th video of the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge construction at Disneyland. Today's February 2nd, 2019.
First of all, we can see that scaffolding has been removed from these spires. Last week, the workers were in the process of removing the scaffolding. As we see here. And now we'll go back to what it looks like today. Next, if we focus our attention to the top of the Rise of the Resistance, we can see that the back of some of the rock formations have a mesh layer added to them. We'll go ahead and look at this one first. Alright, next we'll look at this one. We can see the welded wire mesh, but not the sheet overlay. Eventually, the same type of sheet layer that we saw in the previous one will be added here as well. All of the spires have a concrete layer added to them, except for one. It's the smallest of all the spires. I'll zoom in on it. And it looks like soon this spire will have concrete added to it as well. On the ground level, framework has been brought in. More than likely, this framework will be used for the docking bay, but it's hard to tell at this point. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Between the trees, we can see some rock formations on the far end of Galaxy's Edge. Actually, not only rock formations can be seen, but we also have a glimpse of something directly below the rocks. I'll go ahead and zoom in. And what we can see is that an X-Wing has landed. I took different pictures to try to get different parts of the ship through the trees. This is what the X-Wing looks like on the model. Now we'll go back and look at some more pictures. From this picture, if you look closely, you can see the laser cannon that is located on the side of the wing. Next, we'll look at the model of the spacecraft that is under the rock cavity. In parts 19 and 36, we discussed the possible scenario on how guests will enter the First Order docking bay through the spacecraft. And the official name for the spacecraft is called the Resistance Intersystem Transport Ship. ITS for short. Megan and I still feel that you'll enter a pod with a viewing screen that simulates your takeoff from the planet Batuu in the ITS, and then will be intercepted by the First Order and transported to the docking bay. Chad W. Palm in the comment section of a previous post mentioned that it's possible that the outer part of the transport could be wrapped around the cylindrical room under the rock cavity, instead of the transport being located on the side of the cylindrical room. I feel that this is correct. If this is the case, the pod will not have to be transferred to the cylindrical room, but always remain in the cylindrical room. And what Megan did was she modified her diagram and animation to illustrate this. We'll look at that next. As a recap from part 36, the blue area represents the transport. The dark gray area is the cylindrical room, the light gray area is the docking bay, and these are the pods within the cylindrical room. The dots represent the guests. If the transport's hull was overlapped with a cylindrical room, guests would walk through the entrance to the transport, which would lead to the pod located in the cylindrical room. The pods will rotate. Once the simulation is complete, leaving the planet and getting intercepted by the First Order, guests will exit the pod into the docking bay through a transport that looks identical to the one that's located underneath the rock cavity. And at this point, as guests exit, more guests enter the transport under the rock cavity. And then the cycle continues. Next, we'll look at some construction footage to show how the placement of this transport lines up. Back in April 2017, we saw workers install rebar on the top of the cylindrical room. Notice that there's two levels. The lower level is for the transport, and the upper level is for the rock formations. This is part of a beam assembly to hold framework for rock formations and the rock cavity that will extend over the transport. 6 of them were installed on the upper portion of the cylindrical structure. Notice that the 2 on the right are located at the edge. This is where the rock cavity will be extending out. Rock cavity framework is now being transported in to be placed on top of the beam assemblies and will extend over where the transport will be. This area here is approximately where the rock cavity framework was put in place. This is a picture of the workers installing the rebar on top of the cylindrical room. This area is the side of the rock formations that is located approximately here on the model. And the workers in this picture are standing on top of where the transport will be. On the model, they would be located right about here. Next, we'll go on the Mark Twain. From here we can see the gaps that can be seen between the rocks. And if you look closely, you can see the mesh that is located behind the rocks. A concrete layer will eventually be added to the mesh. This will darken the area so light won't be coming from behind the gaps. And it'll make these gaps look like rock crevices for caves. Sort of like this. The gaps between the rocks are even more visible over here. And as we talked about in a previous episode, even part of the building can be seen. They're actually in the process of sealing the gaps. It's hard to tell at this point. However, if we compare this area to what it looked like last week, we can definitely see a difference. Mesh forms have been added to the front end of the rock formations. I'll dissolve the picture back to what it looks like now. It's really going to look nice once all the gaps are taken care of. Well, that's a taste of things to come.
We can't wait to see what they build next.